This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario.
Hello and welcome to Canada Reads American Style. This is Tara, and today we have a special guest with us. We have author Sarah Raughley joining us. Before I start my chat with Sarah, I'm going to give you a little background info on her. Sarah Raughley grew up in Southern Ontario, writing stories about freakish little girls with powers because she secretly wanted to be one. She is a huge fangirl of anything from manga to sci-fi, fantasy TV to Japanese role-playing games. Sarah has been nominated for the Aurora Award for Best Young Adult Novel and works in the community doing writing workshops for youths and adults. As an academic, Sarah has a PhD in English. She has taught at McMaster University and acted as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Ottawa. She currently teaches creative writing at Lakehead University. Her research concerns representations of race and gender in popular media culture, youth culture, and post-colonialism. Later this month, Sarah will be appearing at the Telling Tales Festival on Sunday, September 22nd at the Royal Botanical Gardens in Hamilton, Ontario. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. That was a wonderful interview. I'm so happy to be here. Or a wonderful opening.
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy to be here.
I was going to say, I cannot take credit for it because on your website, which we will have the link to in our show notes, you have your bio, and I loved your bio. And I'm like, I'm just stealing bits and pieces from your bio because you did a great little, I didn't want to steal it all because I want people to see, well, one, because I didn't write it, but two, I also want people to visit and read it themselves because it's a really nice bio that you've written.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's welcome to come to sarahraughley.com website and learn more about me.
Exactly. Well, that's what we're going to do today too, and get them to learn more about you, send them on your way to the website and get them buying your books because that's what we want. Because I'm so excited to speak to you because I am in the middle of your Bones of Ruin.
Yeah, the Bones of Ruin.
Like a weird mental day. I apologize for that. The Bones of Ruin trilogy. I just finished book 2, and I think I was midway through book 2 when I'm like, I got to see if Sarah will speak to me. So I'm so excited when you said yes. I have lots of questions, but I'm not going to ask too many specific about them because I don't want to give any spoilers to listeners. But let's start with the Bones of Ruin trilogy and the main character Iris because she's amazing.
Well, I'm glad you like Iris. Yeah, it's so funny. I'm currently rewatching The Flash, the television show on the CW, the old show.
Yeah.
And I really loved the character of Iris West, who's kind of like the love interest of the Flash, the Scarlet Speedster, Barry Allen. I'm a big West Allen fan, as they say, is the shipper terminology. And what I noticed is sometimes Black women in science fiction, fantasy programs, we don't get a fair shake, either from the writers, the way that the writers write Black women, or the way that the fans respond to Black women. So I named this character Iris almost as a way to kind of to honor that, to honor, this history, because Iris herself is a representation of kind of the ways in which Black women have been treated, particularly in the 19th century in England. So, The Bones of Ruin is a historical fantasy. It's set in the 19th century and it's set in London, England. And at this time, you had really, truly in history, what's called human zoos. And colonized people, Africans, Asians, South Asians, indigenous peoples, oftentimes would be put on display. Iris, my character, Iris, was based off of a real person, Sarah Bartman, who was taken from South Africa in the early 1800s and kind of put on display in one of these human zoos until she died. And then even after she died, her bones were put in a museum for people to kind of look at. So again, there's a lot of like trauma. There's a lot of, there's a long history of violence concerning Black women. And sometimes that even continues to today in terms of sort of how we're treated, how people look at us. But with Iris, I kind of wanted a woman who embodies that history, but is able to overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
So Iris's superpower in this historical fantasy is that she can't die. So it's like even after she was put on display, even after her bones, were carried to this museum and once again, even posthumously put on display, she just regrew her body and she walked right out of the museum. So Iris doesn't really know who she is. She, that whole regeneration process and the process of dying carries its own trauma. She doesn't really know who she is. And so she has amnesia, and her whole story is sort of figuring out her history and figuring out who she wants to be in this crazy world, as opposed to other people telling her who she should be.
In the first two books too, I also find that Iris is battling with her powers, but also with her rage. Like she's angry. She has a lot of things to be angry about.
Mm-hmm.
And she often, I find, holds it in. She tamps it down, right? So she's not being to her full potential. I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'm really looking forward to book 3. Let's just say I'm really looking forward to picking up book 3 shortly and watching her really blossom, because I find that's what's happening now. And she's made all these great connections with other her friends and stuff, but it's still all about her.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I think it's really important for Iris and for people reading just to kind of see, the ways in which sometimes women in general are kind of told to hold it in, right? If
Mm-hmm.
you're angry, if you're upset about something, hold it in. Or oftentimes we're scolded for being angry. Or if we kind of show ambition, or if we show, that we're upset about something, or we think something is unjust, there are many terms that are used to kind of denigrate women, right? Like, oh, you're nasty,
Yeah.
you're the B word, and this and that. It's so interesting because right now we have, in the American election, they may potentially get their first ever female president. Perhaps, we don't know. We're from Canada going to be watching to see what happens. But you kind of see the discourse surrounding like womanhood, and you always have to be, you're expected to be amenable to people. And Iris in this story, she definitely makes a lot of friends. She always reaches out for community, but she's also portrayed a lot. She's also
Mm-hmm.
manipulated a lot. And I feel like she's at times trying to fight against that instinct to give in to that anger. And it's just something that I've related to a lot, something that I think a lot of readers will relate to, especially.
Yeah. So the Bones of Ruin, all 3 books are out, but you have a new book, I think it's a duology that's coming out in January 2025, The
Yes.
Queen's Spade. Let's talk about that. Tell us about The Queen's Spade.
So talk about female rage. Yes, I think this is another historical YA story. But this character is a lot less, she's not grappling with her emotions the way that Iris is. I think Iris is still very much like a soft girl. She's got soft girl vibes and she's still trying to figure it out. Whereas this character is like, no, I figured it out. I want revenge against everybody. And if you don't like it, then, you're just gonna have to deal with it. So this story is actually based off of the real life story of Queen Victoria's African goddaughter. So Queen Victoria in the 19th century, the Queen of England, actually genuinely did have an African goddaughter. She actually did have a lot of like godchildren who were like adopted into the family, people from, South Asia, people from Africa, various parts of Africa, and they would be adopted into the family. And one of them was a woman named Sarah Forbes Bonetta, who was from sort of the Yoruba Ibado tribe in West Africa, current day Nigeria. And she was an African princess who was orphaned and then kind of taken from her homeland and presented to Queen Victoria as a present. And I always found it fascinating that, this history is just not the history that we're taught. Like I didn't hear about it ever until like, a few years ago, I think, a couple years before I wrote the book. And that's just because I stumbled upon the information. I thought something like this, where you have an actual British royal family with people from other parts of the world who were part of that family, that should have been bigger news, bigger history. And yet that history was erased. Nobody remembers it. It's like these people were erased.
Mhm.
So I wanted to think about why that was and what does it mean for sort of these colonized children who were, I think, in many ways used by the royal family to sort of show how multicultural and how benevolent the crown is and Britain is. But it's like when they weren't needed anymore or when they were more trouble than they're worth, they were completely erased. So I'm taking that history and I'm reimagining it as a revenge thriller. So Sarah Forbes Bonetta in my story is somebody who wants revenge against the British crown for kind of turning her into a propaganda puppet in a way. And she has fun doing it. She's a little revenger and she's mischievous and everything she does with style and of course elegance because it's the elegance that was taught to her. But it's kind of like she's using the tools of sort of the upper class British elite, and she's using everything that she's learned from them against them. So she's very much of a trickster figure in this book. And I definitely wanted to see what I could say about this whole benevolent multiculturalism idea through Sarah's story.
That sounds so good, Sarah. Rebecca and I are huge fans of female rage and vengeance. It sounds, we always feel bad saying that we love a book with vengeance, but I love a book with vengeance.
And it's like we have to always unpack like why do we feel bad? Like we shouldn't feel bad at all. But I feel like culturally we as women, like we're not allowed to be angry. So I'm here to say female rage is okay.
Yeah.
Women, being tough and unapologetic and angry because heck, we have a lot to be angry about. So,
Yeah.
expressing that is okay. And I'm definitely like, it's not always easy. So I think through my books, I'm able to sort of explore those feelings myself.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking forward to that. Yay. Okay. Let's do a little, we'll switch over, not really, but a little bit. Let's talk about diversity in publishing and the importance of diversity in publishing. And are we getting there?
Mm.
Let's unpack that.
I mean, I think that right now, I don't know, the New York Times just released this op-ed that talked about how some of the Black sort of editors, the people who were hired to be in the publishing industry, and they're talking about the American publishing industry, but, many of those people have either switched jobs, they've been let go / fired, they've been forced out, that kind of thing. And it's really upsetting because I know a lot of promises were made in 2020 when talking about Blackness and diversity and et cetera, all of that was in vogue. And I know there have been a lot of great, especially in the YA market, there have been a lot of YA authors and children's authors, especially women, that have sort of pushed for diversity. There have been a lot of movements like the We Need Diverse Books movement and the hashtag Own Voices movement. And even though I think that's created more opportunities for authors like myself to kind of, have our books bought and sold and things like that, there's still a long way to go because I feel like a lot of those efforts have been waning, now 4 years beyond, or 4 years after 2020. I think a lot of publishers are forgetting their commitments and a lot of books are being left by the wayside. A lot of authors that I know and have talked to personally have given up on publishing just because of the ways that they've been treated. And I think not just authors of color, but other marginalized authors, authors who are disabled, authors of different sexualities, et cetera, are noticing that a lot of that sort of vibrancy to foster diversity isn't as strong as it used to be. So I think my worry has been, do publishers treat diversity as a trend? Have they always seen diversity as a trend that can come and go? If so, that's a problem because people are not a trend. Our humanity is not a trend. And I think there needs to be even a stronger push for publishers to protect those voices, especially now that we're seeing a lot of conservative backlash against diverse books and a lot of book banning in schools and libraries. Especially when we're talking about YA books, kids need our books the most. It's youth that really need our books. So to see that there's all this censorship going on worries me. And I need for publishers to be on the ball. And that means fostering diversity. That means marketing our books the way that they would market, the book of a white, cisgendered, straight author, pushing it the way they would publish and push every other book, but also making sure there's diversity behind the scenes as well.
Okay, in an essay that you wrote for The Walrus in February 2022, here's a quote from it. Art is not neutral, it is inherently political.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that quote because I don't think that reading can ever be, reading is political. Sometimes it just is. Can you
Yeah.
expand on that for me?
Yeah, reading is political. Art is political. Art is a cultural product. And we also are products of our culture, even if we don't realize it. We're informed by all kinds of knowledge frameworks, all kinds of ideologies, belief systems that we have come to have without even noticing. How do we learn who we are in society and who the quote unquote other is? Who is the other in our mind? What stories have we been told about the other? What stories have we been told about ourselves? So, through art, in a lot of ways, we learn about who we are in relation to other people. So, things like, books, but also television shows and movies. Who are usually the heroes? Who are usually the sidekicks? Who are usually the love interests? How are they treated? How are they treated by fans? That kind of brings me back to the Flash rewatch that I'm doing and how poor Iris, in the comic books, the Flash is a comic book character from the DC universe. And in the comic books, she's white, but in the show, she was casted as a Black woman. So before even the first episode aired, she was being given lots of hate
Yeah.
by people before people even saw what she was like or what the actress could do or what the character was about, because it was almost as if people didn't want to accept that a Black woman could be loved, could be cherished by the hero, that kind of thing. So, you flash forward to 2024 and you have Star Wars and the Acolytes, and there's a lot of diversity in that show, but a lot of people hated it and didn't give it a chance, and then it was unduly canceled. Now, some people might say, "Oh, well, that show, The Acolyte, was a bad show. It had bad writing." Yeah, but we used to give shows a little bit of breathing room to find its footing, certainly more than a season.
Yeah.
So a lot of the sort of, I think a lot of the hate maybe came from the fact that people didn't really want to see, a Black woman and an Asian man as the main characters, because again, who are we taught or who is the main character, is the hero? How does art teach us about humanity and who can be fully human and who is not allowed to be fully human and who is just a caricature or a stereotype? So when I say art is not neutral, that's really what I'm talking about. And even for the people who think they're just writing a book and it's just entertainment, it's like, no, the ideologies that you believe in are going to be in that book, whether you realize it or not. So, and when we read as well, how do we as readers, sort of read responsibly or even sort of understand our own subject positioning reading these books? Are we being unfair to a Black heroine in the way that we wouldn't be unfair to a white heroine? Are we putting all kinds of expectations on a queer hero that we wouldn't a straight hero, that kind of a thing? So art is never neutral, but that's also why we can sort of use art to maybe challenge some of those archaic beliefs that people still hold on to.
Thank you for that, Sarah. That was amazing. Let's move on to what you're reading, what you're currently reading, what you've read, author recommendations. We're here for it.
Ooh,
Yeah.
well, I am teaching right now. I'm an English teacher, and so I'm going to be rereading so that I can teach various books from the African continent. So Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart is one of the seminal books,
Yeah.
and also I think anything by Nnedi Okorafor. I'm going to teach her fantasy. I think it's middle grade. I think, like, I'm not sure whether that to sort of place it in middle grade or young adult. We'll
Okay.
just say it's a children's fantasy novel called Zara the Windseeker, which I absolutely love. It's about, a magical planet that's very sort of Afrocentric, and a young girl who finds out that she's sort of different from everybody else. She has these flying powers. And so she ventures into this magical forest. It's very sort of Alice in Wonderland. And she meets all these different creatures, these magical creatures, but she has to do it to save her best friend. So it's a very fun book. I'm also going to be rereading Nadine Gordimer's July's People, which was actually written and published before the end of South African apartheid. And it was kind of like a what if story. And because Nadine Gordimer was writing it in the midst of, you know, South African apartheid and the different revolutions and people fighting for their freedom during that time. So she was sort of writing this book as okay, well, what happens if we don't solve this? And it's really interesting to sort of see her take on it. And she's writing as a white South African woman, right? So there's a lot of interesting sort of dynamics there to behold. But in terms of like reading for fun, I am rereading Tracy Dion's Inheritance. I think it's called the Inheritance Cycle now. I just remember Legendborn, and I know she has a fourth book coming out, and it's going to be like this whole series.
Okay.
So it's really cool. It's like this African American girl that sort of realizes that she's part of this Arthurian, this present day King Arthur kind of circle of super friends. I don't know how else to say it, but it's a retelling of King Arthur. The main character Bree is kind of involved. There's a love triangle involved with two like Arthurian legend types. I think you can kind of guess if you're interested in King Arthur who might be involved in that. And I just love it because I'm a big Merlin fan.
Yeah,
Uh,
me too.
I love BBC Merlin. And one of the things I absolutely loved the most about it was sort of the love triangle between Guinevere, Arthur, and Lancelot.
Yes.
So if you're interested in that kind of thing, I would really, really recommend Tracy Dion's books. We're all going crazy over them. And Lizelle Sambury's, I mean, I can go on forever, but I love Lizelle Sambury's Tender Beasts, and her Fate series is really great.
That's amazing. Thank you, Sarah. Those all sound great, and you've put some new authors onto me. So I also love like a series too. I like being able to dig in, jump into a series. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Long series are great for like the mythos and getting into the lore. Although I tend to be pulling back a little bit. Like I used to do trilogies, and now like you said, the Queen Spade is the first of a duology, but it's actually my first book that I'm writing that's not fantasy. So even though it's
Oh,
still lore heavy in a way
yeah.
in terms of the history, I'm kind of pulling back from like the epic fantasy kind of lore geeky stuff that I usually do.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. I was going to say, now that you've mentioned the geeky stuff, I would be remiss if I did not ask you what your favorite manga is. My youngest
Oh,
son is a huge manga reader,
ooh,
huge.
ooh.
And I don't read them, but I hear all about them. So I would love to know what.
Can I ask what he's reading?
Well, he reads One Piece,
Mm-hmm,
Soul Eater, right?
mm-hmm.
I think it is Soul Eater. Uh, and oh my gosh, and oh, his favorite is JoJo's.
Oh,
Yes,
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, I think is
yes,
what it's called.
that is his favorite. Like he loves
Mm,
that one, but he's kind of in between. And he even said to me the other day, he's like, I kind of want a new one to read because he hasn't finished all of I think One Piece's been
oh,
going
that's
on.
like a long, like that goes on
Yeah,
forever.
goes on. I think he said there's over 1,000 chapters and he's on 900. So he's getting close. It's impressive. But he was like, I need something else. So if you have another recommendation, a manga recommendation.
Sure. Oh my gosh, I have a lot of manga. Well, tried and true if you want to go for shonen manga. And in Japan, they kind of have like different markets. Like shonen manga is meant for, it's kind of like the equivalent of middle grade for boys, shoujo, middle grade for girls, and then you have like seinen, which is like more adult for
Okay.
men. And what is the josei? Josei is for, I guess you can say like young adult, new adult for women. And I,
Okay.
I kind of like, I struggle with those categories anyway, because I feel like men and women can read like whatever, right? Like most of the stuff that I've read in my childhood is probably shonen. A lot of girls read shonen. Not as many boys read shoujo, which I feel like is maybe a cultural thing and a bit sad. So I'm gonna recommend some shoujo and some shonen. Shonen, definitely Naruto. If you haven't already read it, Naruto is one of my favorite, and one of the classics, Dragon Ball, one of the classics. Dragon Ball is very fast paced. Hunter x Hunter is not finished,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
but I definitely would recommend it just because the world building is truly on another level. I would recommend in terms of shojo, there is a really great manga and it is finished, but I have to figure out who the artist is. It's called Basara by Yumi Tamura, which I absolutely love. It's like a romance, epic fantasy, adventure set in Japan, but it's like a dystopian Japan. And you have the child of destiny who's meant to like, you know, save the world from tyranny, but he dies in like the first chapter and his twin sister has to pretend to be him. right? So his twin sister is going around pretending to be the child of destiny to bring about sort of the revolution, and it's so great. I also like really cute shoujo manga like Cardcaptor Sakura and Sailor Moon and Sugar Rune and all that stuff, and old ones. If you're interested in old manga, Rosa Versailles, like really old, like 70s old, 70s, 80s, when I think before the big manga boom in America. Rosa Versailles is a great shoujo manga. Like I always say, like it's weird because, a lot of guys online that I've talked to online are like so against reading shoujo manga. And I'm like, there's a lot of great stuff in here. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of adventure, action.
Yeah.
Like if you want action and fighting, Fushigi Yugi has a lot of that. Sailor Moon has a lot of that. Just like a lot of shonen manga has romance in it, and a lot of, like Bleach has stuff like that. So, give, give things a try, step outside of your comfort zone, and you might be surprised what might end up becoming your favorite manga.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me.
And happy reading, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.